Winter, there you go. Okay, I got sound now. Thanks, John. Public service announcement, folks. Keep your winter tires on a little bit longer. I just drove. I live in the northwest of Calgary. Just drove down here, and uh, what is this? April 2nd, and counted about 5 or 6 cars in the ditch. So I think a lot of people are pulling their tires off a little bit too early. And then the other thing, park downtown and walking through downtown, it looks like the city workers have sort of given up on trying to remove snow, or maybe more accurately, maybe they ran out of budgets to remove snow. I don't know, but I haven't seen this much snow in a long time in April, even though I know April is often a good snowy month. Definitely nobody talking about droughts this year. Actually, I remember, I do a lot of hiking. I remember April, sometime during COVID when Kenny was still premier. Remember that year he instituted a province-wide fire ban, like starting on April 1st. So I think we're probably pretty safe assumption that we won't have a province-wide fire ban, not for a while, anyways. All right. Every morning before I come into the studio, I send John a couple of suggestions of things I want to talk about. I said I wanted to perhaps, and then I told him today, I said, here's the things I want to talk about. You pick the topic. And so right at the top of the list, you can see the one he picked there, the petition, the big news about the petition, the independence petition that came out on Monday. Actually, maybe it came out officially on Tuesday, but I knew about it on Monday. So you guys know I'm a canvasser, and there's like 6,000 canvassers across the province. Monday, during the day, we all got an email telling us to make sure we call into a Zoom call on Monday night for a big announcement from Mitch Sylvester directly. I was in on the Zoom call. 54 pages of people, 25 by or 5 by 5, like what's 54 times 25? I don't know, like 1,300, 1,200 people on the call. And Mitch announced very, very matter of factly that the threshold for the Citizens Initiative Act had been met. So the way it works right now, there's ridings across the province. There's the canvassing is organized across the provincial ridings. So there's 87 ridings. So there's 87 little canvassing organizations, captains, and whatnot. And then each canvasser submits their forms, their completed signature sheets back up to a coordinator who gives it to the captain, who then sends them on to Mitch Sylvester. And so Mitch told us that he had in his possession enough to meet the threshold, and then more than that to meet potential spoilage. And this was wasn't even April 1st. So he announced that March 28th or whatever. And the reality is there's still an entire month. We have officially until May 2nd to collect signatures. And I think I'm pretty sure I know why Mitch did this, but maybe Mitch can call in if he wants to tell us otherwise. I haven't seen him on a press conference since, but there is this injunction that is looming over the horizon there to be heard. The six chiefs that filed an injunction that's going to be heard, I guess, in Edmonton on Tuesday next week on the 7th. And Mitch wanted to send a clear signal to the judge and people involved in this injunction that perhaps it's a moot point. We already have the necessary signatures. So that was good to hear. Alongside that announcement from Mitch, and I can vouch for myself, like when he announced that he had the signatures, I knew that there's more to come in the next month, because even my personal, I've been canvassing, I had some in my possession. I had like a whole stack of sheets that I hadn't even submitted, and I know so I'm guessing probably at this point there's probably 250,000 signatures collected, and then we have another month to keep going. The other good news that was announced as part of that, the legislature in Edmonton has been busy, and we'll talk about a few things along those lines. But Danielle Smith introduced Bill 23. I believe that was also on Monday or maybe Friday last. And, Bill 23 is what we call sort of like an administrative bill. It's just one of those bills that fixes problems with other bills. So Bill 23 fixed about little issues, fine-tuned for other bills. But one of the bills it fixed is the Citizens Initiative Act and the Voting Act. And under Bill 23, Mitch Sylvester will be allowed to have a scrutineer or more than one, I don't know, in present when Elections Alberta starts counting the signatures and doing their quality control on the signatures. So that was good news, because I was worried about that. A lot of people were worried about that, right? I mean, it's a sad state that we are now lacking trust in institutions, especially one as crucial as Elections Alberta, but that's the reality. People have lost faith in our senior bureaucrats and their ability to run fair elections and fair processes like petitions and recalls. So Danielle Smith was cognitive of that, and she's made some quick adjustments. By the way, happy birthday, Premier Smith. It was her birthday yesterday. Our lovely premier, turned 55 yesterday. And I had to go verify, because, almost every story you see on April 1st, you kind of double check because you think it might be a joke. But no, that's no joke. Danielle Smith's birthday is April 1st. I imagine she's had quite a few jokes played on her. Anyways, so yeah, and just staying on the independence movement, I'll share my personal experience. I am canvassing, so I was on the road last week. I did presentations in Lethbridge, Drumheller, Leduc, Red Deer, and one here in Calgary, all well attended. But that took me away from my main duty of canvassing, and so I went back to canvassing earlier this week. And the first 2 days, immediately after Mitch announced that, I was personally a little bit worried. I thought, maybe some people will take their foot off the gas and not go sign. And quite the contrary. Monday, Tuesday were nice days. And at my usual pop-up, all of a sudden I had a nice influx of people coming to sign. And I was curious. I asked them, like, did you hear the announcements? And all of them had heard the announcement, and all of them still said, no, I want to sign. I think that was a fear that a lot of people had, that once we met the threshold, perhaps some people would no longer sign or would no longer feel the need to sign. But no, that seems to not be the case. People are still signing. Everybody's got their reasons, and they're all generally, very, very broadly, it all has to do with Carney and what's going on in Ottawa. He's definitely, Albertans are fed up with that. All right. So what were some of the other stories? Oh, and again, please. So we're trying to make this into, not trying to, I want to make this into a call-in show. This is about you. So please feel free to call in. Don't be scared. There's nothing brave about it. Like I said, I'm just a guy. And call in, and maybe you just got a comment. Maybe you got a question. It doesn't have to be on the topics that are there's no topic on the screens. But you can call in. It can be about independence. What are the other stories that broke this week? We still have the story about the gun grab. We still have April Fools. We have other bills that passed in the House of Commons. We got a Canadian on his way to the moon. So anything you want to talk about, phone numbers down there, give a buzz. And when you do, name, where you're calling from, question. Sometimes I'll ask you to stay on the line, and we'll have a little bit of a back and forth. And sometimes I'll ask you to, hang up after you've made your comment so that others can call in. Because right now, like I said, we don't have a proper switchboard where we can just take in 15 calls and have them all on wait. You're calling on one number, and when that line is busy, you got to keep dialing, right? Man on the Moon. I don't. Oh, okay. I was going to jump on Man on the Moon. Let's go to the caller. That's my favorite part. So go ahead. Who's on the line? Where are you calling from?
Oh, hi. Good afternoon, Marty.
Good afternoon.
It's Gordon calling. I've called in before, and I just wanted to express the good news that Mitch has let out. There was no doubt. I felt pretty strongly that we were going to get there, exceed the target, and we're going to move forward. And I didn't do any canvassing, but today I signed up with the Centurion Project. I'm going to help them out as much as I can. I have no experience with that, but I am going to try.
Excellent. I'm a little familiar with the project. I won't talk about it too much today. Maybe I'll save that for another show, but there is a Zoom call on that tonight. So make sure you patch in on that Zoom call to hear more details. All right. Where are you calling from, Gordon? And you've told me before.
Oh, I'm calling I'm calling from Edmonton.
Edmonton.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add too, as we move forward now, and as these numbers continue to grow, uh, it people got to understand the role of mainstream media. It's not going to be kind to the independence movement. They are going to really go have a hit list of people who are going to go after. And unfortunately, Marty, you're probably one of them, and Jeff and Sylvester, Mitch Sylvester, and others like that. There's going to be a lot of dirt and it's going to be a lot of skullduggery is going to start up. So Albertans need to know that this is what's going to happen. And who knows what's going to come out of Ottawa once they see the strength of the movement.
Yeah, well, okay. So thanks for that, Gord. If you don't mind hanging up, but I'll address a couple of things you mentioned because you bring up a couple of points that are interesting. So, Gord just said he signed after he heard the message, and that's good news. And I'm also confident that in any event like this, whether it's canvassing, collecting signatures, selling chocolate bars, selling tickets to an event, you do have people that rush in at the beginning and want to be part of the early buying and movement. Then you got the middle period that sometimes is slow, and then you get that last rush at the end. Humans by nature like to procrastinate, and so I think that we're going to see that there's people are going to sign in the last couple of weeks. And then the other thing that happened with I don't know if Mitch intended to do this, but there's two other things that I think happened after he made this announcement. Up until now, independence was basically the voice were all the proponents. So people like myself, people like Mitch, people like Corey Morgan, we were the ones talking about we want to separate, and here's the reasons why. And the other side was being quiet. So the people against us or who want to stay, they've been quiet. The media has been quiet, right? And a lot of people were hoping that this was just a fringe movement that would go away. So by making his announcement, Mitch forced the other side to finally acknowledge that something's happening. And by the other side, that includes the mainstream media. So that was one of the things that was affecting the ability to collect signatures, is that it was hard to get the message out because the message was only getting out through private voices. But now you're going to hear more talk about independence because the mainstream media is going to start getting in on the action because it's really news. They can't avoid it. And then the other thing that I think is going to be interesting is it's pretty certain now that there will be a referendum, right? We met the threshold. Danielle said that if we met the threshold, she would respect the Citizens Initiative Act and that there would be a referendum on October 19th. The only thing that could sort of hinder that right now is if somehow or other an injunction was successful or the courts stepped in or Elections Alberta said there wasn't enough signatures or something like that. But barring something weird, we're going to have a referendum, which means we're almost starting to go into the campaign mode here. And now those who want Alberta to stay in Confederation, they can't be silent anymore. Because if they're silent, they're running the risk that the Leave side will dominate and get the votes necessary. So you're going to see a more dialogue on the subject, which is what a lot of people wanted. A lot of people just wanted discussion on this, right? I mean, I talk about separation all the time, and I got people who immediately jump into telling me why I'm wrong, but they never stop and ask, why are you upset? Why would you want to leave? So I think we're going to see a lot of dialogue. And on that line, we've already seen who the who the no side is, who the stay side is, and Jason Kenney's already sort of stepped up, and others. So it's going to be interesting in the coming months to see how that all starts to play out. I think there's going to be some interesting debates. Kenney in particular, by the way, Kenney, I think he's pretty brave. Kenney's going to go up against Keith Wilson here twice. He's agreed to debate Keith Wilson in Edmonton and Calgary. I can't remember which one goes first, but I'm gonna be a betting man here and say that Keith is going to win the first debate pretty handily, and I don't think Jason Kenney will stick around for a second fight. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So speaking of, where was I going to go? I was going to go. Let's go to a fun one. Let's go to the moon story. Let's go to the moon story real quick. I was canvassing yesterday and I rushed home because I knew that Artemis 2 was launching yesterday at 4:30, and man, they were almost spot on like that. I think they launched at 4:36. Artemis 2 is the second Artemis mission to go to the moon. The first one went to the moon without a crew. They just sent the capsule. It went around the moon and came right back. Didn't actually orbit the moon. And that was about 2 years ago. They learned a few things. They weren't too happy with the capsule design. They weren't too happy with the heat shield, blah, blah, blah. But now they got it all fine-tuned, and now they launched another one. But to me, I mean, there's two stories there. Personally, I'm an engineer and I'm fascinated by the moon. And I think it's from an engineering point of view, it's pretty cool that humans are trying to go back to the moon. But I think the bigger story for me in the last couple of months is the complete and almost total lack of coverage of this story. I bet you some of you guys are probably almost watching right now and saying, huh, we're going to the moon? Because it's a big story in the US, but here in Canada, nobody's talking about it, which is and I think I know why. There's a Canadian on the spacecraft, right? So there's a Canadian named Jeremy Hansen. Jeremy is like born about a decade after me. Maybe he's 55 years old, ex Air Force guy, CF-18 pilot, Ontario born, but did some training here in Cold Lake and places like that. And by all means, a really, really intelligent man. Been practicing, got chosen to go on this mission like almost a decade ago. Been practicing nonstop, and he's on the mission, right? So they're sending 4 people. Humanity has not sent people to the moon, not just the surface, but around the moon. Nobody's seen the dark side of the moon in like 50 years. And we're sending it, and the Americans are going, and they're taking a Canadian with them, which makes Jeremy Hansen the first non-American ever to go to the moon. And nobody's talking about that because I honestly think it's about Trump derangement syndrome, right? This is an amazing collaboration between Canada and the United States. And the media doesn't want to talk about it because it doesn't fit the narrative. They're trying to remember, they're constantly trying to portray Trump as evil. But here's the Americans doing something absolutely wonderful. John, did we have a caller and they left, or are they back on? All right, go ahead. Put them on, please. Hi there.
Oh, hey, Marty. My name is Rob. I'm calling you from Dogtown. First of all, thanks very much to you and everyone else that's volunteering their time in the independence movement. It's really appreciated.
Thank you.
I want to take you back to the LNG ship that showed up in Eastern Canada, liquefied natural gas, for those of your listeners that don't know what LNG is. So a couple of things. The average folk may not know that you need to reduce that gaseous material down to 161 degrees centigrade to liquefy it.
Yep.
So there's a cost involved in that. And then, you got to put it on the ship, and the ship's got to burn fuel to get here. Whether it came around the Horn or to the Panama Canal, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's too far. And it's just absolutely nonsensical that this country would even think about importing LNG when we should be the exporter. Back to your enterprise that was trying to sell Canadian natural gas in liquefied state to Germany. That's another story, I guess.
Yep.
My question is, and again, I only know this because I was in the industry like you. LNG is required to be regassed, or requires regasification equipment. And I don't think I heard you talking that not only did we sail a ship halfway around the world, but it doesn't get here and then just automatically feed that gas into the system. It has to be regasified. So my question is it a portable regasification unit? Is it permanent? In either case, again, like it didn't just magically show up and all of a sudden.
Great.
Like who owns it? And
Great question, Rob. Of course, back to the original statement, we should be an exporter of LNG. I agree. So we should be exporting it on the East Coast and on the West Coast. I guess Carney did approve one of the major projects will be a West Coast LNG facility. But even if we aren't exporting, it's ridiculous that we're importing, and especially when we have so much natural gas. So the people in New Brunswick should be using Canadian natural gas. And like I said in an earlier show, there is a path to get Canadian natural gas all the way to Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and places like that, Quebec. So it's political willingness. We can do it. To the technical answer, I worked on an LNG facility, and if I was going to do it again today, it'd be much more small, and they would be on a boat. I mean, I think that's to the regasification facility. They're portable now. They're on boats, and I think there are even boats that have it built in. They do both storage and transport. So, but good question. But I also know that there are some regasification facilities in Quebec and places like that. So, yeah, it's still absolutely a travesty that that we're missing out on that market right now, especially when we're seeing what's going on in Iran and places like that. And Rob brings up a great point. LNG has to be, I think he said minus 162. Like, you have to really chill it so that it becomes liquid. And the reason you want to do that, you can get a gas liquid in two ways. Either you increase the pressure and squeeze it, and then it stays liquid, or you chill it and it will become liquid. So the technology these days is to chill it to extreme temperatures. Some of the boats that are stuck in the Strait of Hormuz right now with liquefied natural gas or helium, apparently helium, like all these things that are becoming critical, right? So we talked about it last week. Petroleum, how many countries are starting, like there's a clock now ticking. There's a half a dozen countries that are going to run out of gasoline in the next couple of weeks. Helium is becoming in short supply because I guess Qatar makes a lot of helium. Actually, that's another advantage of liquefying our own gas. When you liquefy huge quantities of natural gas, in the process you liquefy things like carbon dioxide and helium, and so we could have created a market for helium with our own LNG. But yeah, there's tankers full of this stuff all over the Gulf right now, and I guess they're going to have to start venting that stuff because if a big storage tank full of helium starts filling up, you know where that's going to go. So back to are you still there, Rob? Or
yeah, sorry. I'll just ask you this clarifying question, Marty. Then I'll hang up so I don't, take over the whole call here. But I guess to me, it's one thing for the ship to show up, but the actual fact that somebody in this government has planned ahead to have regasification equipment standing by, or maybe they floated it over with the LNG ship. I don't know. But my point is, this is how silly this country has become when we spend money not just to get it here, but to actually have the equipment available to be able to consume the product that we already have under our own feet, right, including in Quebec. So anyway, with that, I'll hang up. Thanks very much for your
time. Yeah, 100%. No, it's silliness all around. But then our governments keep doing silly things, and yeah, I'm not going to go there. So I guess I was finishing then the story on the astronauts. So that was my theory, is that this is an amazing story. We amazing collaboration between our two nations, and the poor Canadian astronaut, Jeremy Hansen is been preparing this for, well, basically his whole life. I'm sure he's probably one of those guys who dreamed of being an astronaut when he was a kid. Actually, he would have been one of those guys because he was born after the last man went to the moon. So I'm guessing that's part of his persona. But he's getting, unfortunately, almost no attention just because Orange Man is bad, and we can't give, we can't set aside our differences even for a couple of days. This should have been a monumental moment. Probably didn't help that they launched on April Fool's Day. I talked about this yesterday with somebody else, and they actually thought it was an April Fool's joke, that the launching of the rocket was an April Fool's joke. Yeah, what a sad day when that kind of thing happens. Actually, speaking of April Fool, hopefully none of you got caught by too many jokes. I saw a couple of stories yesterday that I thought I got caught by one. I saw a couple of stories that I thought were real. The one that I thought was real was that This Hour's 22 Minutes by the CBC was being canceled. But again, that's not really an April Fool's joke when it's that close to being reality. I mean, I've watched This Hour. I remember watching This Hour's 22 Minutes. It wasn't the funniest thing, but they were they were okay. They were relevant at a time past, but these days they're completely irrelevant. And so when I read the story that I thought they were being canceled, I honestly thought that was a real story. I had no idea it was just an April Fool's joke. Did I see again, John, a flash on the screen? We got a caller or somebody left? Oh, okay, no worries. But speaking of, so yesterday was April 1st, and apart from the April Fool's jokes, there were some real news stories that affect all of us, right? So yesterday here in Alberta, it was a deadline for that MOU. So that MOU between Danielle Smith and Mark Carney that was signed just before the AGM there back in October 2025. They had an MOU that they were going to, work on pipelines and work on in exchange for Alberta negotiating a change to the industrial carbon tax and a few other things. Well, that date came and went and gone. I don't think we're going to see a pipeline anytime soon. I don't think Carney's going to commit to anything significant to Alberta, not with this, not until he has his by-elections in a couple of weeks, and not until he keeps seeing where this referendum is going. So that passed yesterday, the MOU. Let me know your thoughts on the MOU. Do you guys think we will ever get that Carney's serious about, promoting pipelines as part of the infrastructure projects? The other thing that happened yesterday, alcohol taxes went up for everyone about, not a huge amount. Minimum wage for industries minimum wage for industries regulated by the federal government went up. I mean, I don't know anybody who works in an industry regulated by the federal government who makes minimum wage, right? What are those industries? Telecommunications, banking, the airline industry. I don't see that being a big one. And but perhaps the most offensive thing about April 1st yesterday was that the MPs and senators and judges and all those people gave themselves a big raise. And, they gave themselves Carney got an extra $14,000 a year, and the average MP got like an extra $8,000 a year. And again, that their raises are automatic and indexed to inflation and things like that. So politicians and senior politicians, federal politicians in this country have no incentive for keeping inflation down under control because they don't care. They get a raise and you pay for it regardless of their performance. So I thought that was that's one of the lousy things about April 1st. And it's almost a sick joke that they use April 1st as the date to pass those raises. Okay, let's go. We got another one. Caller on the line. Please go ahead. Name, where are you calling from?
Yes, my name is Jerry, and I'm calling from Calgary.
Hey, Jerry. What's on your mind?
How are you?
Good.
The petition. I know we've already got the numbers already, but a lot of times when I'm speaking to a lot of my friends and just coworkers and stuff, a lot of them aren't seeing any positive stuff about the referendum. Like most of them don't even know it's about to happen. Is there any way we could probably put a positive ad on mainstream media in order to get more of the information out there?
Yeah, good point. Yes. Let me explain it the way I see it. Unfortunately, in this province and across the country, there's so many rules around advertising and raising money during elections, right? And at this point, the petition is basically a private effort, right? So it was a group called the Alberta Prosperity Project, pretty much on their own dime, going around volunteering and getting the word out. Now, ultimately, once they triggered the petition, they were allowed to start advertising and spending, but their budget's only $500,000. That's the limit. So, so they're spending their money by going and doing speaking events and they're being frugal with their money. Let's put it that way. But I think you and I are kind of on the same page, right? Okay, they've been frugal. Now they're going to have to, for the referendum, they're going to have to start spending a little bit more, and let's also be realistic. Like, we're not going to get cheap ads on CTV or CBC, right? Like that, they're literally going to block us. They're not going to allow us to advertise. So no, you bring up a good point, and it's a challenge. Keep doing what you're doing, right? Talk to friends. Nothing beats that.
Yeah, no, it's just that, like I said, that, in the last 30 days alone, I think I've spoken to maybe a dozen people. I think one or maybe two of them actually have been listening to what's going on. The rest are not catching it. They're too busy with their lives, the kids, and everything else going on. But, the 2 minutes they get to sit down in front of anything informational, it's usually, CTV, BBC, whatever, all the dark ones they're watching. So, yeah, it'd be nice if we got a message out there, a positive public message, of course.
Yeah, we're going to keep trying. I mean, I say we. I use the royal we. I'm not I'm not a leader in in the movement. I have a strong voice, but I'm not the guy who decides how to spend the money. But like I said, the announcement yesterday, I watched the news. Curiously, I watched the news, and I saw, CTV had to speak about it a little bit, and Global did. So there's a little bit more voice. But I'll also say this. There were a lot of people scared to sign a petition in the first month and a half. It's sad that people are fearful of their own government. They're fearful of the perception of their friends. So people were hesitant. I can tell you my observation in the last 2 days. I told you a lot more people suddenly came out to sign, and I even put it out on X on my own platform. I asked people, like, did you sign? And people commented more than I expected. People suddenly came out and said, yes, I signed. So, great question. What do you think of all the snow around town? Am I imagining things, or did the city give up on trying to remove the snow?
Yeah, I think they just blew through their budget the first month, and now they're just probably getting the last guy who's still on the payroll to go out and do the road.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Rob. Okay, cheers. Yeah, I was joking at the beginning of the show, leave your snow tires on. I have a feeling some of the city crews probably took the sanding equipment off the back of the trucks and started parking the plows. And yeah. Excellent. Okay, thanks for calling. Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. That was interesting. Okay, well, I guess I'll just keep going down my list. I know, the top 3 topics that I had suggested. Actually, I just realized I was talking about Danielle, and I was talking about Bill 23. I want to continue along those lines. Danielle Smith introduced this week 2 really, really interesting bills, and I think I'm really happy with them. And that's Bill 25 and Bill 26. Now, Bill 25, I'm sure you guys had more of a chance to hear about that one. That one came out 2 days ago. I can't remember. John, can you find a title somewhere or a news story on Bill 25? It's broadly labeled as an act to reform education or take politics out of the schools or something like that. It's got an interesting title. I know Corey's talked about it a lot, but I also want to talk about it a little bit and give you my spin on it. What's it called? An act to remove politics and ideology from classrooms and amend the Education Act. So, pretty black and white. It tells you exactly what it wants to do. There's a lot of people here in Alberta. I heard this kind of message. I think this is a direct result of the AGM. This is a topic that was talked about at the annual general meeting of the UCP back in November. People are upset about education in this province. Teachers going on strike, some of the ideology that's being taught, and the level of critical thinking that the kids lack when they come out of school. And so Danielle is addressing a few of those things. And here's my take on it. She's been elected. One of the things that she was elected on, that she promised to do, was to try and bring the budget under control. Right there, that's one of the things I'm really upset about. I think the government spending in this province is outpacing population growth and inflation. And I think Danielle went in there well-intentioned, but realized that the two big unions, the teachers union and the health side, which are the two biggest portfolios, right? Like, I don't know, between education and healthcare, that's probably 60 to 70% of Alberta's budget right there. So, and that's where you'll make the big gains, right? If you're trying to cut costs, you don't try and cut costs in the smallest little departments. You go to health and you go to education, and that's where you cut costs. If you cut 10% of the health budget, and by the way, and by cutting doesn't necessarily mean reducing service. Like, I think you can reduce the spend and keep the efficiency at the same level and not affect the service delivery. And so she's having a hard time getting the government size under control, and she has to tackle the unions. And I think she picked the right one. So to me, she's kind of going after the teachers union first, which is perhaps the smaller union, and I'd say it's the more vulnerable union, right? That union tried to hold the province hostage last year by holding that strike, and Danielle regulated them back to work, but also they were unsuccessful. People were upset with the teachers trying to hold us hostage. And so their bargaining power is limited. Their bargaining power of the teachers also diminished considerably during COVID. When we sent all the kids home during COVID and they started learning from school, I thought that was showcasing what's possible, that AI can replace people, that online learning, that Zoom calls can replace the classroom and teachers. So, that's a double-edged sword. So teachers, I think, are kind of vulnerable. So Danielle's going after them first. And she'll kind of bring them under control and maybe send a message to the healthcare unions. But I also think it's a win-win, two birds with one stone, by going after the teachers union, because there is a real problem, which is I feel this honestly, some of the teachers in some of our schools are indoctrinating the kids. I've talked to teachers. I've talked to too many teachers who are at their wits' end and self-censoring in their classrooms because they don't fit they're not wanting to teach the ideology. And so I think it's important that we bring this under control. So the act addresses that directly, right? That under this new act, teachers are to keep their political and whatever ideology out of the classroom and stick to the curriculum. And the curriculum is meant to create young adults ultimately who are capable of critical thinking. And so and if you're a teacher who's opposed to this act, that kind of tells me that the reason you're opposed to it is because you're pushing your ideology. Because if you're not pushing your ideology and you're simply teaching the curriculum, there's nothing in this act that will upset you. But there's already a lot of teachers that are upset about it. I mean, and the act brings up a few other things, bringing back the national anthem in the class. And another important one is like getting rid of non-approved symbols, right? You can't, like, the pride flags in the classroom, they're going to be gone once this act passes, right? The only flags that should be in a classroom is the Alberta flag, the Canadian flag, maybe the city flag, and and depending on a few events, the Métis Nation or things like that. But do we fly the pride flag or the Palestinian flag? I mean, you can have the Palestinian flag if it's part of a teaching curriculum on geopolitics, but not to be hanging up there as a political statement. Definitely no Black Lives Matter flags or stuff like that. But the other part of that, like I said, is two birds with one stone. It's bringing the unions under control. It's stopping the indoctrination. But the important thing about stopping the indoctrination is that you're also preparing future voters, because that's one of the problems we're facing right now. As it's the schools are indoctrinating future people and that are literally turning against the province. So I thought that was I'm happy to see Danielle going down this path with that. It was voted on very by the membership at the UCP, and then the other bill that came out yesterday, and I haven't had a chance to really go into this one because this one is really, really hot off the press. But that's Bill number 26, which again, Bill 26 now, immigration oversight, is one. It's kind of again, it came out at the AGM. These were things that the membership wanted, right? At the AGM, She got an earful from people saying that immigration was out of control, and by the way, immigration is a federal mandate. So somebody comes in, Ottawa decides who comes in and out of the country. So Ottawa decides, but the reality is once they're in, and let's say they land in Toronto or they land in Montreal or Vancouver, even in Calgary, once an immigrant lands in the country, they're free to go wherever they want. And a lot of them are choosing to come into Alberta. We don't choose who gets to come into the country, and then they come into the country and then they overwhelmed us. And they seriously overwhelmed us in the last couple of years, right? We grew our population by about 4%, which is a completely unsustainable level. It stressed our schools, it stressed our hospitals, our other infrastructure, our housing, and all sorts of things like that. And Danielle was told clearly to start addressing that, and that's what this act does. So and as an example, in this act there's something in there that says, if an Alberta business wants to take advantage of the temporary foreign worker program and potentially hire I could get into so much there, but if somebody wants to take advantage of that, they have to register and get permission from Alberta to do it. That's just an example, right? And there's a couple of other examples like that. So Danielle is going to use every tool at her disposal to take control of immigration, even though it's not or her total purview. Go ahead, caller. Where are you calling from, and what's on your mind?
Good morning. I'm calling from Battle River Crowfoot. My
Oh.
name is Sylvie.
The famous Battle River Crowfoot, home of the Poiliev by-election that cost $2.3 million. I'll talk about that, but what's on your mind, Sylvie?
Okay, my mind is Bill 25. I was fortunate enough to be a child of the military who spent a decade in Germany, in what was West Germany at the time. So I learned from old fascists, reformed fascists. I learned from Hitler Youth. And then I went over on the USSR side and I learned all about communism and I saw the wall fall. The problem is the teachers for the last 30 years have been pushing communism good, socialism great. What we've done is bad. We can't have this capitalism. They've brainwashed a whole youth.
Sorry, did you say you're a teacher yourself, or no?
No,
Oh.
I wasn't a teacher. I said what the teachers have done. I pulled my children early in 2000s from school.
Good. Yeah. Actually, that'd be an interesting statistic. I wonder if I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that Albertans, more kids in Alberta are homeschooled per capita than probably any other province. It seems to be. Is that what you did? You homeschooled?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. No. Yeah. I agree. An interesting perspective that you bring it up. So you experienced it in Germany. Now, how come you didn't succumb to it?
Because like I said, I talked to so many people. I went to all the battlefields. I went to the camps. I walked through the showers. I was in Berlin when the wall fell. I was actually over in the USSR, Poland, Yugoslavia, all those areas before and after the wall fell. So that was my defining moment as a teen.
Okay, so as firsthand, you saw the negative, devastating impacts of people who promote socialism and communism. That's powerful.
Exactly.
That's powerful. Yeah. And what do you say to somebody like? I mean, I'm amazed that people still I haven't even talked about the NDP convention this weekend. Like the NDP convention was basically socialism gone bonkers. But what do you say to people who one of the arguments you always hear is like, well, nobody's done it properly. You ever heard that argument that it's never been tried and done properly? Like, what do you say to Avi Lewis who wants to try it again?
I have heard that over and over and over again, and I give them the last 100 years. Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, USSR, Japan was even in. Vietnam is still actually a communist country, but they've got lots of capitalism in it.
Right.
But really, it hasn't been done right because you look at over 100 million people that have died.
Right. Yeah, and then the other
in the last.
yeah, and then those countries you mentioned, those are countries people are trying to escape. Nobody ever tries to escape. Nobody tries to escape Norway. Nobody tries to escape, the USA. But people try to escape those countries. Thanks for the call. That's yeah, great feedback. Thank you so much.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Thank you.
have a great day. I
You
didn't
too.
want to talk about the NDP convention too much because I think it's been talked a lot about. But let me just mention this because there is a context. There is an Alberta context. First of all, if a person had never seen or heard of Avi Lewis and had never seen the NDP and just saw the convention this weekend, you would have sworn that it was comedy. There's no way it could be real, right? The the ideas that Avi Lewis has, and then watching the comedy of like equity cards at the NDP. Have you shown clips on that, John? We don't need to show clips on that, right? Maybe show a picture of somebody holding an equity card. I mean, like the NDP. That's how that's one of their weird ideas is that the reality of humanity is that we're not all equal. Okay, some of us have different talents, some of us have different skills, some of us are early morning risers, some of us are late evening workers, whatever. And so we all have different skills, different mindsets, different talents, and this whole idea that you can make us equal almost always fails. And so then the NDP, their idea for this was they call it these equity cards, right? You could walk up to the mic and rather than wait in line to make sure that somebody who had less equity than somebody else, meaning wasn't blessed with the same skills or talents, that you got a card and allow. Anyways, it was I don't want to get into too much of that, but I do want to get into this bit. The election of Avi Lewis causes an interesting problem for Naheed Nenshi in this province, right? Because the NDP party across the country is one where there is a parent-child relationship. So the federal NDP does implement policies that the provincial NDP kind of have to follow. And Naheed Nenshi, right here, right now, he's battling for his political life. He's losing popularity. He's up against Smith. Smith is hugely popular, doing things like Bill 25, 26, and others, doing great work. And Nenshi's trying to stay relevant. And then we've seen Nenshi in the last couple of weeks try to appear more common sense, saying, I'm okay with pipelines. I'm okay with this. And then boom, he has a new boss, right? For all intents and purposes, Avi Lewis is his new boss, and his new boss says he's totally against pipelines. He's totally against hydrocarbons. He wants to nationalize grocery stores and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to watch Nenshi. Danielle's own words was, square that hole. Like he's got a, you got a picture. Yeah, that's Nenshi's new boss. And by the way, and Nenshi's pretty savvy politically. Avi Lewis has never been a politician in his entire life. He comes from he is sort of political royalty. His father was Stephen Lewis, who by the way passed away I think yesterday. And his father was an Ontario MP, had been ambassador to the UN and things like that. And so Avi is going to have a hard time navigating the political landscape, doesn't have a seat. I'll come back to that. I see I got a call. Don't like to make the callers wait too long. Go ahead, caller. Where are you from and what's on your mind?
Hello, yeah, it's Timothy calling here from Edmonton. How's it going?
Good, Timothy. How are you?
Oh, not bad, yeah. I guess touching on the NDP there, it was pretty ironic to see there, after doing all the efforts that they did in order to discriminate basically against men within the convention there, they still ended up, and they also chanted, I believe it was, they chanted at one point, eat the rich, but they still ended up electing a multimillionaire white guy as the leader of their party. It's pretty ironic.
Who became probably richer after his father passed away yesterday. Not wishing that on anyone. Losing a parent is always a terrible thing. But yeah, I know what you're saying. So
yes, it's true.
So,
but
go ahead.
The reason I was calling though mainly was to touch on what you talked about with the previous caller earlier, just regarding getting the word out about the petition and such. Up here in Edmonton, I'm obviously paying attention to the Western Standard and the news that's going on and such. quite up to speed on it, but my wife, who's less politically involved, commented that she was like, if it wasn't for you, she said, I wouldn't even know that this petition was going on, which I thought was quite something to say.
For
Like,
you,
for
referring
someone
to
who's
you
less,
or referring to me?
yeah, no, to myself,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So if it wasn't for connection to politics through me, she would have no idea. Like, with no advertising going on, yeah, in some of the bigger cities, and probably especially Edmonton, obviously because it's a left-wing stronghold, it is tough to get the word out just to the average person on the street. And I guess that's a question for you. I don't know. Do you think after the petition period, things will kick up more in earnest in terms of advertising and getting word out, with third-party advertisers and stuff like that? Because it seems like so far, the Stay Free Alberta petition campaign has only been doing town halls and these pop-up events, and that's about it. But there's been no actual advertising on billboards or the news. Or
Well. Stay on the line. Stay on the line. But what about this? Right? It could be a double-edged sword, right? So okay, so there's a referendum. The referendum is not coincident with any other election. So literally, it's a standalone referendum. So there's gonna be people are gonna be asked to go vote on October 19th. So there won't be. So it's not even a political campaign. There won't be a lot of advertising. So what if maybe this is a strategy? Maybe the only people who should promote it are the separatists among people that are already sold on the idea, and then just get them out, right? Like if only separatists come out, you see where I'm going. So that could be a strategy, but I also, but at the same time, I do think the other side will catch on to that, and they'll get worried, and so they'll try and mobilize the Stay group, and that's where I think it's going to be interesting, because, like I said at the beginning of the show, what are they going to? How are they going to sell it, right? Like there's a referendum to leave. How do they convince people to stay? Is it just they're just hoping that the people are happy with status quo and they'll come out and vote on it? Like I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think we've seen all that they have to provide so far based on even Jason Kenney's last debate with Bruce Party there, where, I mean, what did he offer? He didn't offer anything positive, any positive vision for Alberta within Canada.
Right.
Basically, his entire argument was fear-mongering about, what all could potentially go wrong, the effort that it's going to take to create new agencies to cover what the federal government has been doing. And outdated nostalgia for a Canada that's long past, essentially.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a positive vision at all. And so I think that's going to become even more clear once he has this debate with Keith Wilson, because Keith Wilson is very good at pointing out the gaps within the federal arguments. And the positive vision that Alberta presents as an independent country.
Great question. I'll have to think about that, right? In the coming weeks, like, do we need to really advertise it hard, or do we sort of keep it under the radar and then suddenly, because I know there's groups, there are people like that. Like, we know who we canvass. We know there are people well interested in this. Like, and I think we're going to keep focusing on that group, which is why we want to get the 500,000 signatures. If we get 500,000 signatures, we basically have 500,000 people voting. And what if only 1 million people come out to vote, or 900,000, right? That's not out of the possible, because, don't quote me exactly, but, there's 3 million electors. And if there's 3 million electors and only 30% decide to come out because it's October 19th, too close to Halloween, and they're busy, only 1 million people come out. Well, to win the referendum, we need 600,000. Like
yep.
Well,
even if you consider in the last election, there was only 1.7 million that voted in the last provincial election.
Right.
And out of that, I mean, it was 930,000, I think, that voted for the UCP, which determined the provincial government. So, if the same number came out as last time, we would need 930,000 votes. But yeah, if the number that comes out is even smaller, potentially, yeah, we might not even need as many. It's tough to say, though, because in previous referendums, if you look at Quebec, for example, the turnout was extremely high. But that was making major waves across the entire country, and there was huge campaigns going on. Literally everyone was talking about it.
Yeah, so. Plus they had something that we don't have, which was the proponent was the party itself, right? Like they elected a separatist party. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine if the UCP was pro-independence, boy, we'd have a pretty strong voice, right? So no, it's going to be it's going to be Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And then let's not forget, I mean, I wanted to talk about it. I think Carney is still the wild card in this. He can keep pushing people over to the separatist side. I think if he cheats in the coming weeks and wins these 3 by-elections and does something silly like prorogue Parliament afterwards, he's going to push more people onto our side. I mean, that's honestly, he's been our best advertising so far, has been Carney. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Everything that he's been doing has been drawing more people towards independence, I think. Like even this $90 billion high-speed rail transit link in the east. Yeah. Which is going to be of no benefit to us out here, but every Canadian taxpayer is going to be shelling out $4,000 in order to fund it.
Yeah.
Like, that's just another case for Alberta Independence out here. Like we want our tax dollars to be spent here to actually benefit things that we can use. I mean, how many people in Alberta go to Ottawa regularly or at all? Like,
yeah, it's going to be zero.
Pretty much the only time that people go to Ottawa is, for a field trip, maybe in school, and that's about it. So all this money being spent out there isn't benefiting us at all.
Yeah. And just stay on the air for a second, but I wanted to tweet about this week, and I haven't had a chance to, but anybody go look up Lac Mégantic. Right. So Lac Mégantic was a rail disaster that occurred in Quebec about 12 years ago. And the government's been trying to build just a bypass, a 12.5 kilometer rail bypass around Lac Mégantic. They haven't done it yet. It's been 12 years. The website exists. So and they've spent almost $1 billion doing it. So if the government can't build 12 kilometers of rail, how are they going to build, a high speed rail? My God. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, and in the meantime, too, it was also just in the news this week that it was reported in the National Post that the Liberals have $200 billion that they've advocated towards saving the climate, towards their various climate initiatives.
Yeah.
And our emissions have barely been impacted at all across Canada. And meanwhile, the rest of the world doesn't care at all about it.
No.
Carbon taxes have been removed at various countries around the world. Europe is desperate for energy. They're trying to reverse some of their previous disastrous policies. And meanwhile, Canada is just doggedly hanging on to this idiocy.
Yeah.
Again, another reason why Alberta should be independent. Like then we could make our own decisions regarding this. We could allocate billions of dollars towards like hospitals, for example, instead of failed attempts at changing the climate, which we can't really impact significantly anyway.
Awesome.
So
listen, appreciate the call. Call next week. Tell your friends to come watch the show, but appreciate the call. Thanks, bud.
Okay, you bet.
Yeah, have a great day. This is awesome. Okay, so folks, everybody stepped up. I got a bunch of calls. I still have about 3 or 4 topics I wanted to talk about that I never got around to. I will mention them real quick just because I did want to talk about, I mentioned Carney potentially proroguing Parliament, right? That was a rumor that came out, and today he came out. Let me put some context real quick. So there's 3 by-elections on April 13th, 2 in Ontario and 1 in Quebec. And if Carney wins those by-elections, he will have a majority by the slimmest of margins, but he will have a majority. And there was a rumor that he was contemplating proroguing Parliament, kind of like what Justin did, which in effect allows he could really go far and not just prorogue Parliament and restart it. He could launch an election. If you look at the polls right now, if you believe the polls, he's leading like in a huge way. And so I keep saying this. He can taste the real majority. He doesn't want just a little majority. He wants a big one. But keep this in mind, folks. That story got appeared out of nowhere last week, and that's not by coincidence, right? So the Liberals, because afterwards Carney came out, violently saying, "Oh, I won't prorogue. I won't prorogue. I won't prorogue." That was the mainstream media working for the Liberals, testing an idea. How are Canadians going to react to proroguing, right? And then the other story that came out this week, which was interesting, and we had a lady call from Battle River Crowfoot. What story came out this week? It's a year-old story, but a story came out this week that the by-election in Crowfoot cost $2.3 million. Okay, Why would they suddenly a year later talk about that? Well, again, they're testing Canadians' appetite for an election, because if Carney drops the writ and we have a snap election, that's like a $600 million touch. So it's no coincidence, right? So when you see these weird stories, that's the media through the Liberals testing ideas to see how we react to it. So I just want to talk about that real quick. And then I had two other stories, and I guess we'll go with those stories next week. But it was part of the April 1st, right? Yesterday was April 1st. Well, April 1st is the start of the budget cycle for the federal government. So, you and I mostly run on a January 1st to December 31st budget cycle. The federal government runs from April 1st to March 31st. So the 2026 or 2025, 2026 year came to an end a couple of days ago. And right now we're into the next budget cycle. We just got the last budget approved, way out of cycle. So right now the Liberals owe us a budget. By all means, they should be working on that budget, getting ready to present it in May or something like that, which is another reason why potentially proroguing Parliament changes a whole bunch of things. So I just wanted to bring that up, where the budgeting is completely out of whack federally, and so now we're going to see the books for last year, and I'm going to make a bet here that in 2025, 2026, Carney blew past the $100 billion deficit. That's my bet, and we'll see how that goes. And then the other thing I was going to talk about, a couple of weeks ago, I was complaining that we didn't have a parliamentary budget officer. A lady named Annette Ryan was proposed. They brought her up. She has a role in finance somewhere in government right now, but she's being suggested as a new parliamentary budget officer. She has to be approved in the House of Commons. So we'll see. The House of Commons in a week-long recess right now, and then we'll see what happens when they come back in the coming weeks. Hopefully we have a PBO. She comes highly recommended, and other people seem to like her. So hopefully that's the case. John, was there a call that we're just showing up, or that's all good? I guess we're kind of running out of time, eh? That's another show for this week. Hey, thank you. You're not making me rant as much, or not rant, but my monologues are getting shorter. So great show. Thanks for calling in. Like I said, man, it's not, don't be shy. Call, we'll have a chat. The show's about you. Please continue to call in like this and tune in every Thursday at 1:00. I know some of you guys are working, and gals, but call-ins are important to the show. Hope you'll join me again next week at the same time. And I got to put out my my little promotion here. Thanks to the Western Standard for letting me have a voice on this platform and using this studio. And I got John, who's me and John are learning to work together. I'm sure you guys have noticed now we're getting, I'm not as nervous. I'm probably a little bit better organized. And so thanks to the Western Standard. And if you're not a member, please consider it. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. And the email is right there on the bottom, www.westernstandard.news/subscription. All right, folks, hope to see you next week. Cheers.